It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial complex. I am joined today, as always, by my co-host Steve. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. So I don't have another concert review.
Yeah.
I haven't been to another one, but I did something that I have not done before. I watched an episode of South Park. So
You'd never seen an episode of South
I've
Park?
never seen 1 second of South Park, but I saw a story in the news where they had one episode that was making fun of the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Have you seen this? So,
I'm not a big South Park guy, so no.
I've never watched it, but I saw a couple news reports about this episode where they had a Canadian prince and his with Ginger with red hair and his model actress wife and it was just, I mean, ruthlessly making fun of and laughing at those two. Very well done. If that is what South Park is. And I don't know, other than the 25 minutes I watched, I applaud their courage in publishing that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend it.
Steve, 20 years late on South Park's brand of humor.
Hey, I mean, you don't know it either, man. I'm not the only one.
I know it. I would assume they would do cutting satire.
I have no idea. I have no idea before this morning.
Are you seriously telling me you've never even seen the Dan Snyder episode?
No. I didn't know there was a Dan Snyder.
Oh, yeah. They took him to the cleaners.
Oh, I got to look that one up too then.
Yeah. That's like, and it's like probably now, it's got to be 10 to 12 years old. It's not even like super current.
Everything's on YouTube. I can find it on YouTube, but
I'm sure. Yeah,
I've seen that we talked about on the Hog side, but there's some internet group that has put a bunch of Dan Snyder cartoons out. Also, they're like 5 or 6 minute like shorts that are really good. But I don't think that's South Park. I've seen those, but that's some other producer.
Yeah. So there's, in fact, people bring it out all the time because they obviously have like a little South Park version of Snyder in it. And, it's kind of like a Cartman type. But anytime people are memeing about Snyder, people will reach back and get that cartoon South Park Snyder and use it for various memes.
At least it's such an easy mark. Not surprising.
And speaking of Snyder as an easy mark, you really are starting to get to the sense that he may be, the Snyderness of it all may be starting to rear its ugly head in the process of this sale. Like, and anybody who's clear-eyed about the sale has just been, the only thing that could truly capsize it is Snyder himself and his ridiculousness. And it kind of starts to feel like that might be happening. We've got a lot of news this week, actually, on the Bezos front. But even just, I think it was on yesterday, which would have been the 24th from when we're recording. The New York Post, Josh Kozman had some more details. It just seems like things are teetering. And if you could say one thing, and this is where Bezos is pretty important, that Snyder's not, at least his excuse is he's not getting the price he wants.
Yeah. So the way this went down is middle of last week for you guys who are listening. The Washington Post ran a story that said, Bezos is really interested this time. He's retained a firm to help him evaluate, the finances of the team and whatnot. And this is something like the fans have been, crying for, forever. It's mainly because Bezos is the only, billionaire they know the name of. Anyway, and so the Post ran this story. I could not read it because I do not have a subscription to the Post. But so I have not read the story except for the headline. And I just lost the note. But anyway, so that I believe it was what's the woman's name wrote the article. But regardless, then what Chris is talking about is the New York Post had a story by Josh Kozman called "Jeff Bezos bench from Washington Commander Sales Bids Come Up Short." published on the 24th. And so what this says here is that Snyder has, in fact, barred Jeff Bezos from bidding on the team. Now, it's fairly well reported by multiple sources that the bidders thus far have not bid what Snyder wants. We've heard at various times that Snyder has a $7 million target. This New York Post article talks about Dan Snyder's $6 billion cutoff, meaning that's, I guess, his minimum required to sell. And this thing says that Josh Harris, who owns the 76ers and the New Jersey Devils, has bid around $5.5 million. And that Bezos has been prohibited, like I said, from bidding. That, in other words, Snyder would rather give up $1 billion or thereabouts just because he does not like the fact that Jeff Bezos' company printed stories which appear to be mostly true about Snyder and his team. It's pettiness on an epic level.
Yeah, and just the kind of Snyder being Snyder type of deal that, I think people worried this whole time would rear its head at some point. So anyway, the Washington Post article was Jeff Bezos hires investment firm to consider bid on Commanders. It was the typical NFL Washington Post writers, Mark Maskey, Nikki Javala, and Liz Clark.
That was what I was trying to remember. Yeah.
Three of them teamed up on that article. And the news there basically was, now, there was significant news because this law firm that he, or investment lawyer.
That company was Allen and Company is the investment firm.
Yeah, they're legit. They've been involved in the last two sales of NFL franchises, the Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos, I believe both times on the buyer side. So, so that's, there's only a few of these. So the past is the past is prologue, as they say on this, and that's not a small thing. Now, the New York Post article really says that even with that step up in seriousness by Bezos, which the Post does acknowledge and say that is, in fact, he's been interested the whole time. And this was just, in fact, that this firm has been, wasn't just recently contracted last week. It's probably been on board for a while. But it's also in the war of the headlines, is this Bezos, announcing that this firm is on board? Is that part of this pressure campaign then to dislodge Snyder from his, putting Bezos in jail? Because you could certainly see going to the press, both for the excitement, the other owners, Bezos is involved, everyone throw a parade, yada, yada. Is that a way to put pressure on Snyder as it raises the cost? Because it's ridiculous. Snyder, okay, I got to get between $6 and $7 billion. Everyone sort of figured that. It's kind of new news that's now his basement, that he's not going to go below. But he seems to be working against both sides of his interest, right? Because everybody with a brain and all the legit reporting has said that until Bezos gets in, you don't know the real valuation, or or where the price is going to be, because you don't have the big whale in, similar to the Walton family was in the Denver sale, to actually set that price and to knock everybody out. So if the person that's going to bring the price tag above the $6 million is obviously now entered the fray, but you want to sideline the guy who's going to bring that up, I mean, that's just classic Snyder, working against his own interests. So this is where I think we're getting into silly territory.
Oh, yeah. But you had to expect it, right? I mean,
yeah.
This is not just us on this show and others in the media and whatnot just bashing Dan Snyder just because we have to have a target. This guy is legitimately just a horrible, rotten human being, in every capacity. He really is. There's one line in here that I thought was very insightful in this New York Post article. And it says, they're quoting a source to say, he wants to say to the NFL, don't let them say we weren't here. He being Bezos. And so what this source is saying is that Bezos, even if Dan Snyder's going to be this petty and not going to sell it to him, he wants to be able to say to the NFL, look, we tried, we did try to be here. Don't blame me if this sale doesn't go the way you wanted. And that would also be kind of a leg in on the next sale, whatever it is. Because I think Bezos is an international brand and Amazon is international, and they don't necessarily have to buy the Washington team. They could almost do that with anybody and achieve the same goal, achieve the same results, which is to boost the price and the value of the team. So I thought that was very insightful.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. The signaling like, hey, we backed up the Brinks truck to Ashburn, and we're perfectly willing to be aggressive in this process, and we were sidelined and told we weren't welcome. So hey, NFL, I know you want us in our club. You don't want to piss us off. We just spent $9 billion for a junk package. So they just want Goodall and company to know in full well that Bezos was trying to bail them out here and has not been allowed to.
Yeah. Don't blame us if this little tiny tyrant, is being a jackass. Don't blame us.
And you haven't been able to take out your trash. Like you this is a problem of your own making to a large degree.
Yeah. And now the other thing that I thought was insightful about this is very short, but it had a lot in it that was insightful. The last line, a decision on whether Snyder will finally walk away from the team he rooted for as a child is expected by the annual owners meeting that begins March 26th. Now, there's two things in that one sentence. One, they give a deadline. I don't know where that deadline came from. They're saying it's expected. So sources are telling him this. We've not heard that deadline before. And two, it's whether Snyder will finally walk away. I've been saying from the beginning, I'm not convinced that this man is going to sell. He never said it. He's just arrogant and stupid enough to not do it if he, gets a $500 million less or something like that. And so that's kind of a signal to me that nobody's sure this is actually going to happen. And then also, what's going to happen if March 26th comes and goes? Is it just done and off the table now? Or what? But I think that sentence is important too.
Yeah, if you are heartily rooting for this sale to happen, it has not been a great couple days, I don't think. And I definitely, maybe if he ever was really serious, but I think cold feet are on its way. And let's talk a little bit about like this price, because I find this sort of fascinating. Let's just say he's got to sell it for the bargain price of $5.5 billion, right? That sounds like about the range of where the bids are at. And it's not just about what those bidders are willing to pay. It's how much financing that they have on hand, and the NFL's rules about that new owner having 30% cash, basically, like have that deposit in pocket. So I also think it's not that, these other bidders probably wouldn't be willing to spend 6+ on it. They can't. They don't have the financing, and they don't have the cash on hand to do it. Now, I'd be curious to see if the NFL actually rolls back those numbers at some point, if that helps this get over. I think that's a lever the NFL might, do they waive some of those things if the Sixers Devils guy, is almost there. But I do find it interesting, one, that we're seeing that this is a failure, that it might only get 5.5, considering that's still almost a cool $1 billion more than the Denver Broncos and less than a year. So, let's keep a little perspective about where these valuations are going. I think probably, it sounds like, including Snyder, got a little too excited about, 7 to 8. If it sells for 5.5 billion, that is not a devaluation.
It's still a record.
Yeah.
Two things. One, 30%, for those of you who are math deficient, is a little over 1.5 billion. It's like 1.65 billion in cash. Now, the NFL does have a 30% rule, but that's not like it's like enforced by the federal government. This is just an in-house rule. They've waived it in the past. They waived it for Dan Snyder a year ago, when he bought out his minority partners. And so, I think they would. The reason why there's a minimum really is, this is just my opinion here. I've not read this, but my opinion of it is they want to make sure that the financing out there isn't so steep that if an owner really goes south, that they're not going to be able to pay off the financing and prevent somebody from foreclosing. Because the last thing they want is Bank of America or somebody or some equity financing to foreclose on a football team. So I think they're trying to keep the equity injection from the principal owner high for that reason, I think. That's just, again, my opinion here. But I definitely think the NFL would waive that rule if they had to. And look, I think, matter of fact, I said cap out at $6 billion in the first place. It's where I kind of thought, to me, that was maybe where the line is. But this team is almost a distressed asset, almost. If you think about it, they've had every problem under the sun: poor management, poor attendance, poor sales. The physical asset, which is the stadium, is a train wreck and needs to be replaced. It's not an asset that's selling at the peak height of its valuation, and so Snyder might have got excited, but getting $1 billion over the Broncos is a gift, I think, considering the shape the franchise is in. So, I said it last time, I think, maybe it was on the Hawks side. Are you really going to walk away from multiple billions just because, you lose out on another $500 million? At some point, I mean, enough's enough. If he's really had enough of being the punching bag of the fans and everything else, take the 5.5 and leave. That's going to make no difference on your life. Another $500 million. So, but I think Snyder's just got such an extreme amount of arrogance, he won't do that, of course.
Right, plus the Bezos personality thing. I think
you don't have to sell to Bezos. Take Josh Harris's offer and walk away.
Well, I mean, right. You're just, and also if this Kozman New York Post reporting is true, and we don't have any reason to say it's not at least well sourced, then it's insane to sideline Bezos here. If this is what the price you want to get, you need him to pull the others up. And so what's it? I can't remember his name. Josh Smith, is that his name?
Josh Harris,
Josh Harris, yeah, Josh Harris. Like, even if you can't be it's a gift you might as well sell to Josh Harris today for $5.5 billion if you're going to sideline Bezos, because it's a gift to Harris to begin with.
Well, he's not going to bid against himself.
Right. So if you're telling the big whale out there, thanks but no thanks, well then if I'm Harris, I'm like, well, how about 5.2? Because at that point it doesn't make any sense. You're doing a gift to him. You might as well just wrap it up and sell it to him right now.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. I totally agree with you. He's actively harming the valuation of his own team by not allowing the guy with the most money to bid. This should surprise no one because he's that petty. But I mean, we've been over the history of Dan Snyder on this show. There's no business enterprise that he's in charge of that does well.
No,
everything fails, and with this guy, it's all about ego. And what he ought to do is he doesn't even have to embrace it publicly. Just let Bezos be a part of it, even if you don't want to sell to him. Just don't say it out loud. Let him get involved and raise the price. You can always reject his bid, but the fact that you don't let him bid has the impact what you said, which is Harris, who's a very smart business guy on his own, presumably, is not going to bid against himself. He's not going to arbitrarily raise the price just because Dan Snyder wants it. The way free market economy works is there has to be a reason for people to pay more. That reason is bidding. There's multiple parties who are involved and want something, so they offer more money. That's not happening here. So it's Snyder. Maybe he doesn't care, but all he's doing is harming himself. And again, like you said, just take Harris's bid now and walk away. The guy just will forever just befuddle and amuse me.
So a lot happening on that front this week, obviously, some kind of real news rather than just rumors, or at least a combination of some news and rumors. We'll see. It's going to be it's going to start to be a daily, weekly story from here on out. We could talk about it every show, and
we could. Now, prediction though, has your prediction changed?
That it's gonna ultimately result in a sale?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it doesn't. I think my prediction of timelines and the sort of amount of agita that everyone's going to have to go through to get there. But I still think you're talking about eye-popping money. I think we're gone too far down the river. I think the league will turn up its pressure in a variety of ways, including making it easier for an owner to buy. And I also know that, like, I'm not sure that, I mean, the business, to your point of it being a distressed asset, was already teetering. I'm not sure the business could survive the, nope, psych, joke's on you, I'm still the owner. I think that, I mean, you thought it was bad before. That would have a pretty big chilling effect.
Well, I think the fan base would revolt in ways that they haven't revolted so far. I think you would have nobody at these games, nobody watching the games. There'd be no the following that would be there would be no reason for advertisers to pay more. I think it would be devastating for the business as a whole, particularly if the team then does its normal and also doesn't win. Winning cures a lot. But I don't know. I think Washington's almost so far down the rabbit hole that even if they won for a season or two, it might not help them that much. Really, if Snyder doesn't sell, I don't know if there's anything bringing him back.
I think we're beyond the just winning cures all excuse. I think that was that was very 2018. But I totally agree on that front. And also, we have evidence, right? They've been better. They've been 2/3 through the season and had home games that legitimately mattered. It didn't matter in the stadium. It
was
didn't
a little,
really move the
little
needle.
more, filled, but not really,
Yeah, no, it wasn't. So we've had years where the opening home game coming off it, where they should be okay and half empty. I think they're kind of winning. They're sort of winning resistant at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I've been off Twitter for a while, but I get it kind of tangentially through Alex and Dave on the Hog Sign stuff, and I mean, I think there is a core group of sycophants on Twitter apparently that are like all in on this Commanders, garbage and blah blah blah. But I don't think, if taken as a whole, the fan base has not come back. It just may appear that way if you're on social media, but the evidence would suggest it came back a little bit, but they're still not anywhere where the NFL would want them to be. I think that is the truth of it in terms of fan base, marketing, and all of that stuff.
And all of that recedes and gets worse than it started if he is back as owner.
Yeah, right. I think it goes next level.
Social media is a funhouse mirror anyway. So
then you got to. I know, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you got to, people, if you're all into that, you have to understand that Twitter is an exaggeration, an extreme exaggeration of reality. But then the following question to this would be, if he doesn't sell, does the NFL go down the next path, which is to formally force him out? Because what I've said from the beginning was that to make Dan Snyder sell, they basically need to go to him off the record and say, the gig's up, little man, you got to get out, otherwise we're going to just publicly disclose all this stuff. That might have happened. We don't know. That might have happened. But if he just says no, essentially gives the NFL the finger, then at that point, do they take the steps to vote him out? I don't know.
I think that at least this process of the sale gives them some intermediate steps, like we already talked about. Do they waive the cash on the barrelhead rule for a Josh Harris type? So that's one thing. They could also say to Snyder, hey, we'll forgive a percentage of what you owe us, right? So do they waive some debt? Do they pool? Do they pass the hat at the owners meeting and get the throw in $500 million to get the price? I mean, so I think they have these sort of like procedural votes, we'll call them, right? That they could still do without having to do like a, yay or nay, we want him out of the league. So I think it actually gives them a few more levers to pull now.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I don't think the owners in any way want to have like a survival style, vote off the island kind of thing. They don't want that, because as much of a scumbag Dan is, Little Danny is, sorry, say his correct name. Um, Other owners have, problems too. A lot of them do. And they don't want that to come back on them. And so they just don't want to publicly air dirty laundry unless they really, really have to. So yeah, I liked your ideas. I mean, the NFL could kick in, some X amount of dollars. They could forgive debt. There's a couple things to make it sweeter. Because I think the argument then would say, okay, look, Danny, you have this much debt, the sale price is this. You have what, two? I'm making a number up here about like 2 billion in debt, something like that, maybe a billion and a half. And so your net with Josh Harris is going to be 4 billion. Now Bezos, granted, would be $5 billion. So we will make up the difference. We will reduce your debt, and then we'll kick in another half billion. We're going to get you close to the net profits you would have gotten anyway. So take that and leave. That's where Chris is going with it, and that's a decent idea if they wanted to go that route.
And I think they're willing. They want him out. That's not that's not up for debate. They don't want to be on. All the things that Steve just said in terms of why they don't want to do like a Roman Coliseum vote on it. But they want him out, and I think they'd be willing to take some financial pain. They'll pay the tax, so to speak. Or they'd at least want to talk about what the tax price would be to get him out. They'll take the back door.
There's still people who like money, though. I mean, so there may be. I would think they'd be more willing to forgive debt than they would kick in money. Just flat out like
Probably,
everybody
yeah.
kick in money. So, but that might be like the last step. If it were me and I were the NFL, I might say that. I'd say, look, this is it, son. We're going to forgive your debt. We're going to throw in X number of dollars, but this is it. And if you don't do this, we will vote you out. I mean, I think to actually hand him money would be, I think, the final step before the vote off the island.
Yeah, I agree. I think we might see some version of that. It might just look like lowering the cash on the barrelhead fee for Harris or Harris type, but it'll be something like that. I think it'll be part of the final deal. The one thing I would watch going forward, especially over the next couple of weeks, is we got the report even like a month, 6 weeks ago about Bezos considering selling the Washington Post as part of all this, which doesn't.
It's just rumors. I don't buy that.
It is, but it's persistent because it's mentioned in these recent ones too that he's still considering it. I wonder if one idea I have is that that's the pound of flesh that Snyder wants. Right. So because Bezos doesn't need to sell the Post, I think, for a conflict of interest. I don't think anyone cares. And I don't think he needs to sell the Post to raise the financing. But if it's like, hey, buddy, you want this, I'm going to make you sell this property that, pissed me off. That's the kind of pettiness Snyder. I could see that him having to be out of the Post might be part of a condition for sale.
It's the height of pettiness.
From Snyder, nobody else.
No, I got you. It's the height of pettiness, and I mean, normally I would say that's silly, but with this guy, I mean, you just never know. I mean, it's unbelievably petty. What would be really funny is if Dan Snyder bought the Post and sold the team. Now that I would buy popcorn for.
that would be interesting.
Yeah, it would, but yeah. The other point I had just totally went out of my head, unfortunately. Oh, the other thing is, I've said this before, but I don't think you fans out there really know what you don't know with Jeff Bezos. If you're expecting him to be the savior, he might not be the best choice. Like I've said before on this show, he has a poor reputation inside of Amazon. The employees of Amazon don't have good morale. They have very, very high turnover at the Amazon corporate headquarters. Jeff Bezos has a lot of other distractions. He would bring a lot of attention to the team that you may not want. I don't know if he would be the best choice. It's not, the NFL is a salary cap, as everybody knows. It's not like he could throw tons more money out there than other teams could. So you root for whoever you want, fine. I'm with you, anybody but Snyder. But I don't know if Jeff Bezos is going to be the panacea that y'all think that he will.
I can't move past anybody but Snyder. So I'm no Bezos guy, but I'll take
understand.
a normal crazy billionaire versus Snyder.
I get it. I'm not saying he wouldn't be better than Snyder, but literally anybody would be better than Snyder. But I just think there's probably better choices. I just think the fans are rooting for Bezos because they know him.
Oh yeah, I'm certainly not. I'm not rooting for him. I'm just rooting for it to get done. But I think if the best thing for the franchise is, I think, is Josh Harris for sure.
Probably, but there may be other bidders that we don't even know about.
Yeah, there's apparently at least at minimum one, possibly two that haven't been revealed.
Yeah, and it may be people we're not even that familiar with. It could, like, Byron Allen could be involved somehow. I mean, the NFL's wanted him to get involved because he's a minority. You never know. It's not just Josh Harris. Harris just kind of the other name that everybody knows.
But I think that he's good. Why he's the best option. I like somebody who's involved in the business, right? He's involved in groups that own sports teams. It's his business. I like that part of it.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what the other part of, other than Bezos personally, the bigger part of it is he's got so many other things going on. He's running Amazon. He's got all of these other things. He's flying to space on the Amazon rocket, whatever that thing was called. I mean, this is not a guy who's going to focus necessarily on the team. Whereas Josh Harris, as you say, he's a professional sports team owner. And granted, he hadn't won with the 76ers or the New Jersey Devils either, but I think he would be far more interested in the day-to-day operations of the team than would a guy like Bezos.
Yeah, and to your distressed asset point, you're going to need to bring in people that just know how to rehabilitate a, mailing list for season tickets and like corporate relations and stuff. I mean, there's going to be like some real foundational fixes that aren't going to really affect or be that interesting to fans, but there's a lot of work to do on that front.
Yeah, and you'll need somebody that can get a stadium built, somebody who knows how to do real estate. I would guess Harris does, just because, again, he owns two other franchises. He kind of knows. Bezos could do it too. Don't misunderstand me. But you don't want like a total neophyte. You don't want like Matthew McConaughey rolling in here with a bunch of financiers behind him and him being, that wouldn't go well, I don't think. You do want a professional. That's the thing. Washington has been run by a non-professional for so long that the fans in DC don't even know what it's like to have a professional team. You really want a business professional running things who quietly knows what to do. You don't want media. You don't want press. You don't want a bunch of nonsense going on all around you. You want a guy who can come in and run it like a business and run it to win. And I do agree with you. I think of these names that are bandied about, Harris is probably the best one.
Yeah, and that's why I sort of always said, or a type, right? Or like, similar situation.
Somebody like him.
Yeah. So we'll see. Next up, we got obviously we love talking about college athletics and the sort of sea change type of things that are happening in how those sports are governed. The Athletic had an interesting piece this week that kind of broke down the University of Michigan's I don't know if it's new, but at least new to the world, basically their ecosystem of organizations, nonprofits, and collectives that would fund basically their ability to finance recruits for their football team, probably primarily, but their basketball team certainly, and who knows what else. What's fascinating about this article, which is called "Is Michigan Maximizing NIL Opportunities? What to Know About Collectives Recruiting Impact" by an Austin Meek, who I think we've talked about before. He's obviously on this beat. It basically just lays it out, right? It gives you the business plan. That's kind of the interesting part of this article and all the things that you have to do. Now, the funny part of this, before I hand it over to you, Steve, is this is all stuff that these people know how to do. This isn't stuff that anyone's inventing. They're just legitimizing the practices that they've been doing for probably the last 50 or 60 years, right? The string of car dealerships for appearances, the like how you pool money and move it to certain places. It's just no longer needs to be clandestine.
Yeah. We don't so much care about the University of Michigan in particular, rather than it's a great example of what has happened to the business of college sports, particularly football, since the NIL laws and rules from the NCAA came out along with the opening up of the transfer portal. So what this column is basically saying is that the University of Michigan athletic department recognizes that they need to have a better process involved to pay their players, and they are asking the Michigan alumni and supporters to form collectives to do this. Okay. And so and the difference is, like Chris said before, is that there was some of this stuff kind of under the table, like you can go all the way back to the 80s, and Brian Bosworth posed in Sports Illustrated with a Corvette, and where'd he get that Corvette? He's just a college kid. This kind of stuff has been going on for literally decades, but Michigan is acknowledging that they are behind. They need to come up with a concrete way to finance the purchasing of players. And if they don't, they're not going to get the players. It talks about the recruiting class in here. Michigan obviously had a tremendous regular season. Normally, that would bring in a bunch of 5-star recruits. They've been a little less in that regard. And the reason is that they've been trying and failing to get some collectives off the ground. And by the way, so nonprofit collectives, what they're talking about with the collective is you get a bunch of alumni and supporter business folk together to form an entity that can sign up players to let them receive name, image, and likeness marketing dollars. And a lot of it is going to be like sending them to go sign jerseys and things like that. They're not all going to be in like Chevrolet commercials. But it's a pretty long article and pretty detailed. And like the name that they're talking about is Valiant in here. That's the name of this collector they're trying to get off the ground. And there's another one, Champion Circle. It says for-profit collective that launched last summer as a platform for donors to pool funds for distribution through Valiant Marketing Agency. Stadium in Maine is another one. Ann Arbor NIL Club. There's several of them, and Michigan is basically saying you need to get your act together, so they can maximize the effectiveness of the dollars that they're spending to purchase these players.
My favorite. So they basically, Steve mentioned the Stadium in Maine and this Champion Circle, but these are 2 of the 4 organizations that basically got greenlit by Michigan to do this and got basically, allowed to happen. But my favorite of them is the MGO DAO. DAO, which, if you want to know, is a decentralized autonomous organization. It's a blockchain thing, basically. But MGO DAO, a blockchain-based fan community that raises money for NIL deals by creating and selling non-fungible tokens known as NFTs. So well
recently.
Yeah. So I just think they're just, I thought that was pretty funny.
Chris, you know more about the blockchains and stuff than I do. You're far more involved in it than me, and my business takes me to real estate, not to blockchains. I truly do not understand the business model of an NFT, non-fungible token. To me, it simply seems like an image, a digitized image that you can purchase for money, but I don't understand why I couldn't just save that image and download it for free.
You can. So that's why this was essentially a fad. NFTs. I'm not saying the whole thing is a fad. You could make an argument for that, but I'm only talking about NFTs here. It's a fad. That's why it's a fad. That's why it spiked. That's why the bottom is completely fallen out of that market. Now, that is the sort of one sort of animated GIF meme version of an NFT. If you drill down into the technology, then you're really talking about is distributed blockchain-based ownership notes. And so now it was applied to, like, let's just call it an animated GIF, right, or an image. So that's what people got excited about, and that's what suddenly became trading. But the technology that undergirds it really could be anything of value, and the blockchain has a way of keeping decentralized ownership and then being able to show you own those rights to that thing. So if that isn't if that's something of more tangible value over time, then that marketplace system still works. And that's why if you actually notice, they actually spell out non-fungible tokens. They don't call them NFTs. That's because they're starting to even signal here. It's not really about the trading of digital art, or it really is about whatever is deemed valuable. We've got a marketplace for the transaction, and then the revenues from that will be what drives NIL.
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, you can have the most brilliant processing logistics in the world, but if you don't have a valuable commodity that people want to invest in and purchase and own, it's all for naught. And so I hear you. That makes sense that the blockchain technology is highly valuable, but perhaps that needs to be transitioned into a product that actually makes more sense for the public. I don't know what that would be.
So if we marry these two worlds a little bit, you have to have a lot of people agree to this, but it's not science fiction. You could use the smart contract technology that blockchain enables, and which is what drives an NFT's ownership chain, for real estate. If all parties agreed that was the contract of record and the sale mechanic. So if you had people with valuable commodities who were willing to enter that market and put those things for buy and sell, and then honor the smart contract technology, but to be real, you would need to have those level of legitimate.
You need a product. You need a physical product,
whatever. Yeah. So and they'll come, and there already are some, and that's the catch-22 of the technology, because for that to happen, you have to legitimize the technology to some degree, which means it's by nature centralized.
We've got technology that's better than the product itself. At the end of the day. But the problem, the fear I would have with blockchains generally is twofold. One, I think the public has lost faith in them to a certain extent as a result of the Sam Bankman-Fried mess, which is just international monetary fraud, on a humongous multi-billion-dollar scale. And two, I've long been afraid that various federal governments, the United States federal government and others, will attempt to intervene in order to collect taxes from this in a way that they aren't currently. And once you get the government involved in anything like this, it goes off the rails. The appeal of blockchains and cryptocurrency is that it's monetary value that's outside of the typical monetary process. And I'm afraid that as the governments get more and more involved, like I've heard for past, 2 years or so, that federal government is at some level considering a federalized cryptocurrency, which sort of defeats the whole entire purpose of cryptocurrency. So before I would go too far down the rabbit hole of traditional business of doing it, I would want to evaluate those two things, the faith post SBF and the role of the government.
Well, the catch-22 is they actually need more regulation to exist. Although that means it fundamentally changes what it is. So therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
So because the problem is if you want to keep these things pure, which is, decentralized, sort of out, kind of, let's call it a gray market, right? It was a gray market play. But to be a legitimate market, you got to play by legitimate markets rules. And so like this whole technology, especially now that they've had the fallout, was one thing when you're riding high, but crypto is already crashing before SBF, and he's only the most well known. There's others that have crashed and are crashing as well that do the exact same thing he does.
Well, when you don't have rules, this is what happens. That's so
right.
It is a catch-22.
Yeah, and so if you want to legitimize whole swaths of this, so that you might be able to use something like a blockchain-based smart contract to do distributed ownership of a piece of land, right? Like that there's nothing that would say that couldn't work, but that stuff has to move into the realm of the rules-based world, and then and so do they want to? And if enough people do, is it even change? And believe me, there's plenty of governments that are looking at, in fact, I'd say the United States is behind the game in terms of governments looking at central digital currencies and doing this more centralized at a central bank level.
Well, yeah, and your real estate example, it could work. From my perspective as someone who does major commercial real estate on an everyday basis in my real job capacity. From my perspective as a legal guy, I don't know if I would really care the financial arrangements that the people had. The only thing that would matter to me is what entity is going to take title to it, and then we'd have to document the finances of it, of course, but we could work that out in terms of valuation in these loan agreements and whatnot. So I think it could work for that, but it would just take a sort of a fundamental shift in the way business really operates. Because I think right now they still see crypto as sort of an on the fringe kind of thing. It's not really ingrained in major business, really. And so I think it would take that before we could get to where Chris is suggesting.
Yeah, the technology, some of this technology will probably ultimately win, but a lot of things that we associate with this technology that are really just sort of off, almost just like exhaust fumes of the technology, cryptocurrency and NFTs, we might be seen as something funny, right? Might be the pet rocks of viewed as pet rocks in 2032 or whatever. In terms of it wasn't that funny, everyone got excited about that. But I would be not shocked at all if blockchain-based smart contract ledgers were driving lots of traditional business things in the background that no one even knew.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like from a legal perspective, we could work with it. I don't really care how they pay each other.
You'd work with one of these DAOs. That's exactly who you'd work with, because that's a governance structure about this. So you would have an entity, that would have the responsibility of holding those things and honoring those contracts. So you could actually, like, let's say MGO DAO was selling seats in a stadium. Let's even keep it a little bit smaller, right? Something like that. And you knew as the sort of brokerage lawyer type of deal that you just had to deal with MGO DAO, and that the law would indemnify you from them because they were holding the responsibility of honoring those contracts, and then you were negotiating with them. That's all totally plausible.
Well, yeah, and then from a real estate perspective, I could totally see, the holders of blockchains as just another form of equity financing.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to get us down this rabbit hole. In terms of Michigan, what they're trying to do here is put this Valiant company in the middle of it. Valiant is a marketing agency. They're trying to get all these different entities to kind of form together and looks like run through Valiant. That's the point here, because they know some universities are more ahead on this than others. Michigan appears to be not behind, but somewhat behind. And so they're trying to get everybody to kind of get their act together and form sort of one major collective. That's sort of the big picture point behind this. And really, it's the reason why I love this story is it really shows how far the business has changed. I don't know if it's for the better. Even 5 or 6 years ago, we weren't talking about having to the only way you could bring players in and keep them at your university is to pay them truckloads of money through collectives formed by donors or supporters, rather. That is a fundamental shift. And I don't know if the NCAA really thought through. They kind of jumped wholeheartedly straight off the cliff, like Thelma and Louise style, rather than approach it carefully. So I think they're going to pay the price for this.
Oh, well, they definitely just opened up Pandora's box. They didn't give this much planning or thought. That's a given. I actually think, to me, this is just sort of making transparent what was already happening to a large degree. And at least now, we've got a structure in which we understand these things, right? One's a for-profit company and they're governed that way. One's a nonprofit company. I mean, it's a pretty gross abuse of that tax delineation of 501c3, but whatever. But all these things are above board. I don't think they're really doing anything. Now, you could argue that, when you have to work in the shadows, that is a regulation of its own in terms of size and scale of this. And when you make things legitimate, then you have kind of a greener pastures for size or scale. And that's probably what will happen here. But to me, this is just, this is sort of a, sunlight is a great disinfectant to some degree. Now,
maybe, but I don't know. I guess my point is, I don't know if ultimately it's good for amateur athletics, because it's not amateur athletics anymore. It's professional athletics under the label of a university, and it sort of fundamentally changes kind of the mission and the point of why they were doing it in the first place.
I guess I didn't think that was the case to begin with. So,
oh, fair enough. Well, they bring up on this thing the Texas A&M's 12th Man Foundation. For those of you not in Texas, the 12th Man Foundation is something that's been around for decades. It's one of the most prominent and supported organizations in college athletics. It's a very, very big deal. It's very, very wealthy. And Michigan is sort of striving. It literally says in here that Michigan is striving to have sort of one foundation that's that prominent. Chris, I know you want to go into the volleyball player part of
I
this?
just thought it was interesting. So if you go deep into this article that we already referenced, this one about Michigan, that it's a pretty in depth. It's not a drive by. So if you kind of want to get a little bit of a 360 on this issue, it's a good place to start. But they mention where are they now? Oh, this Keith Mitchell and his daughter Chloe Mitchell. Keith Mitchell's an ex-Michigan football player, and they're starting basically they're starting something that I think an app that basically it's called Playbook. That's right. And it basically is a marketplace between athletes and brands, right? So it's a place where both brands and athletes can shop for these kind of endorsement deals, right? So, these kind of secondary markets and business plans that provide these secondary markets for these relationships to get made. And it's fascinating because his daughter Chloe, I guess they call her one of the first college athletes to profit from NIL, and she's a women's volleyball player at a small college. This is not UCLA, USC, Washington State University. She goes to somewhere called where is it? It's Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now, this is not NCAA. This is because it's a smaller school. This is NAIA, similar governing body, a just different size of school. And they were more proactive in opening up their NIL rules, so you could do stuff faster, basically. But she's got 49,000 Instagram followers, 5,500 YouTube. Now, if you look at the influencer, that's not that great, quite frankly, but she's got 2.7 million TikTok followers. So she's got sizable followings on 3 mediums, and she's just gobbling up endorsements on her videos, which aren't even all exclusively volleyball related. But I just think it's fascinating. We have, we start to see, we know how the big boys, the football and basketball, are going to eat kind of with all these new NIL rules. But you see in this article, well, one, these companies that will come around to sort of up around this ecosystem. There's new businesses that will emerge. And then you're starting to see a poster child for basically what happens in these smaller schools and these edge sports and, quite frankly, female sports where, the right people are going to be able, there are going to be success stories here that aren't, the point guard and the quarterback.
There's another young lady who is a gymnast at LSU, whose name I can't remember. It's kind of in the same boat. Obviously LSU is NCAA; it's a major school, but gymnastics is not a money-making sport. But she's kind of in the same boat as this. What was her name in this? Carrie Mitchell, was that it? Something Mitchell. Anyway, same kind of thing. I mean, I've never watched them, but apparently she's amassed a humongous TikTok following, and that is how this young lady is making a ton of money. That's interesting. The more interesting part to me than that is that this app that they've formed, because you can get TikTok famous and get advertising dollars, but it sounds like they've innovated kind of a marketplace, and presumably they're taking a fee every time there's a referral through the app. That's far more interesting to me as a business guy than just becoming TikTok famous. Pretty interesting.
They had in the article about the volleyball player, they did sort of break down some of the economics. They had somebody who was basically a social media analytics firm, and they said one sponsored post on Mitchell's 48,000 Instagram followers would be worth $516. So she says, "Hey, this is a great tennis shoe," or I love this, face cleanser, blah blah blah. On Instagram, she'd pocket $500 basically. On TikTok, that same following that she had, I think what I say, 2.7 million.
Yeah.
That same video, she can collect $15,000 to $20,000 on, just on and this is just from metrics analysis. This is just numbers analysis. You do this, you get this.
The Chi Coms are watching her closely.
Yeah. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, we're on the other. You could, and reasonable people have all kinds of different opinions about the ramifications, good, bad, everything other. But I think it's undeniable that we are on the other side of the looking glass here with college athletics. It's not. We walk through? It's on the other side.
And there's no going back. It's like if we go backwards, the spikes are going to blow the tires out. It's probably a topic for another day. But I don't know if I like the way college athletics is going, just from my perspective as a casual viewer.
And I think we'll eventually get a split. There'll be something that looks like traditional college athletics, and there'll be something that looks like.
We've been saying that forever on this show. Get rid of the NCAA.
It's already happening.
Stop pretending. Yeah.
So the other, this is kind of we're just going to play the hits. This is Brian Adams at his Las Vegas residency. But our third story today is, of course, LIV Golf, which just cannot seem to get out of the headlines. Which I think
gift that keeps on giving to podcasters.
Yeah. So now I know there's a crowd out there that says we know nothing about golf. So put all the warnings in front of this that you want. But Steve is a lawyer, and we have been following the story. And LIV Golf got a bit of a setback in the courts this week.
Yeah. Okay. So we go back in the Wayback Machine like a year or so ago or more. When LIV Golf first bribed/tempted a bunch of the top PGA golfers to come over, and many golfers did, they got immediately banned from participating in PGA tours. Those golfers originally filed an antitrust lawsuit against the PGA, essentially claiming that the PGA is improperly stifling competition in violation of federal antitrust laws. As a result of that lawsuit, the PGA filed a counterclaim against the LIV Tour, claiming tortious interference with contracts, meaning mainly that LIV Golf came in and interfered with the contract between the players and the PGA, improperly interfered. So then there was that counterclaim. LIV Golf then stepped in and filed, it appears, I have not read this part, but it appears filed the same antitrust lawsuit as the players did. So a lot of the players backed out of the lawsuit at that point. But what has happened recently is we found a couple articles, but the one that was the most legitimate was out on Forbes. PGA takes on LIV Golf's Saudi backers. Everything you need to know about golf's messy controversy by Emily Washburn, dated February 23rd. So the PGA got a favorable ruling from a magistrate court and federal court that they wanted to bring in the financial backers behind the LIV Tour, the Saudis. And I'm trying to find the name of the thing in here. PIF, that is the name of the Saudi. It's the Saudi Public Investment Fund. So the PGA wanted to bring the Saudi Public Investment Fund into the lawsuit as a defendant in the tortious interference claims. The Saudis basically argued that, hey, we're Saudi Arabian, we're not subject to the jurisdiction of federal law. This is dumb. We're not going to participate. Well, the MAG court agreed with the PGA, meaning that now the public investment fund, as well as somebody individually, Yassi Al Raymanin, I guess, he now has to be deposed. And more importantly, maybe that there's going to be a ton of discovery coming to this Saudi Public Investment Fund. The Saudis will appeal this through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So it's not over yet, but it's a major victory for the PGA, and also for those of you who want the most likely corrupt world of Saudi business unmasked. This might be the best chance for you to do so if the Saudis just don't literally give the finger to American courts and just say, "Oh, we're not doing it." Do your worst. Um, if they went down that rabbit hole, then you would have to think that the media contracts LIV Golf have are in jeopardy. So I don't think they'll do that. But it's a pretty major step here, a pretty major victory. Chris.
Yeah, no, even non-lawyer here, I was like, oh, that seems substantial, right? Because like the idea that they can be even considered to be dealt with by an American court, right? Which is what this judge essentially said. And I like, there's that good quote by the judge. I don't have it right in front of me, but because she's like, yes, the Saudis' argument is you can have you can't just because there's a foreign investor in some business doesn't mean that the U.S. courts have jurisdiction and all this other stuff. They're allowed to have foreign investors. And she has some quote similar to like,
I'm
okay,
trying to
sure,
find it.
but yeah, it's obvious that you're the sole proprietor, generator, and everything, and 92% investor. So this idea that this is just like some foreign investment in an endeavor is a joke.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the quote. It is plain that PIF is not a mere investor in LIV. It is the moving force behind the founding, funding, and oversight and operation of LIV. Magistrate Judge Susan Van Koolen reportedly wrote in her February 9th. And by the way, I should just explain what a mag court. I keep saying mag court. Mag court is magistrate court. What that is that is a court that is beneath the federal district court, which is the trial court, and they're the mag court is the ones that handle all the pretrial rulings and pretrial motions and stuff, which frees up the federal court to do whatever it is federal court judges do. So that is where it is. And so, yeah, there's multiple appeal levels for this ruling that they could go through. They could the district court could step in. They almost never step in at all. So I wouldn't expect that, but they could file an interlocutory appeal they probably will with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Interlocutory appeal is like an appeal that is going on during the pendency of the trial for one particular issue. It's a big enough issue that I think LIV/PIF will definitely file an interlocutory appeal. So we'll see. But if it stands up, and the odds are greater than not that it will stand, I think. It's a major victory. I think it could lead to a settlement because I really don't think the Saudis want to disclose a bunch of stuff in U.S. federal court at all.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's not. It hasn't been a good couple weeks for LIV Golf. You wonder. And you also wonder, is it how much the Saudis? Well, a couple things. One, I totally hear what you said about like the Saudis could just to say, "Hey, we're not playing ball with you," right? And there's only limited jurisdiction here, so that could get pretty complicated, and they maybe want that fight to begin with. So none of that will be good for golf, by the way, if you care about the sport of golf. Or on the flip side, when does this become too much heat and this sort of gambit by the Saudis to sort of, I think the article calls it sport washing or, kind of reputation washing here is felt like is going to be almost more dangerous because what they're arguing here is that like, well, where does it end? Anytime we're involved in anything, do we have to reveal all the books and, have all these, government regulations over our actions? So at what point do they think this is too much heat and they just pull out from underneath it? It hasn't, outside of this nerd golf and the sports business pages, nobody cares about this. All the people that even casual golf fans just know this is ruining the sport of golf. So at what point, if the U.S. government does start to side with the PGA in these kind of important moments, does at some point they just pull the plug because it's too much grief and they put too much legal risk?
Yeah, okay, a couple of points on these. One, don't forget that the other side of it is an antitrust claim against the PGA. And this column in Forbes mentions that the DOJ is also investigating the PGA for antitrust claims. And so that is the hook, that LIV Golf would hold is the antitrust claim. Now, they could drop the civil suit, but they can't necessarily force DOJ to stop their antitrust investigation. So I think that is one thing they would hold on to there. But the other thing is, the courts, for the most part, take kind of a wide um, view of jurisdiction. Granted, it's a Saudi company, but you're doing business in the United States. You're doing contracts with United States citizens. And I think some of these tournaments are in the United States. This article says that there are, I guess, 14 tournaments a year, and the payout is 25 million a year. If they're doing business at all in the U.S., even if the investors are in Saudi Arabia, they are subject to U.S. jurisdiction. If they do contracts in the United States, they're subject to the jurisdiction in the United States. So they can't just go, we're the bunch of Saudi oil sheiks and piss off. I mean, that's not necessarily how the court's going to view it. I think it's probably more likely than not that their appeal of this ruling will fail.
Yeah, no, it's starting with the fact that they could only get a TV deal with the CW. And we talked about there's positives and negatives, and we talked about that. So it's not like at least they have one, but it's certainly not the A or the B or maybe even the C level. And losing in court. And Tiger Woods has been getting more vocal. Some of the other golfers have been getting more vocal. It seems like it just hasn't been a good stretch for LIV Golf, and what was kind of a crazy gambit to begin with. So it really will be interesting. And one thing this article says that if some of these things happen, it might just be pushing to a merge. And really, what a merge is just a return to some version of what everyone considered normal.
Because the PGA's been hurt tremendously too. Their tournaments, we have to remember to look up ratings, PGA Tour ratings. How many news stories have you heard about PGA golf? And granted, Yeah, I know, right? We just came out of winter, and I get it. But outside of the majors, which like the Masters is not a PGA Tour event, for example, the British Open is not a PGA Tour event. The PGA Championship is, but the U.S. Open I don't think is a PGA Tour stop either. I don't think. I'm not sure about that one. I know 3 of the 4 are not PGA Tour events. There was a there's a tournament last weekend, meaning 2 weekends ago for those of you who are listening. And the big story I noticed on ESPN was that Tiger Woods was playing. That was the only
made the cut, I think.
Yeah, he made the cut. I looked, he was like at -1, and he was like 44th or something. That was the only story from the tournament at all. Was it even on TV? I didn't notice if it was on TV or not, other than like the Golf Channel, maybe, probably. The PGA Tour has been hurt tremendously by losing guys like Phil Mickelson and all the rest. And so it's in their best, a merger type thing would be in their best interest as well. They're just going to have to get comfortable with getting in bed with a bunch of creepy Saudis.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll be following this. There'll be more information. It was kind of a small news item, but probably pretty substantial news item. So we wanted to hit it.
Yep, it was.
All right, Steve, what's going on in the hog sty?
All right, we are in the heart of the off season now, kiddos. So we have started our draft preview series. We did wide receivers this week. I think we've got safeties next week. We're in the heart of our free agency preview. We're doing all those on the show. We're obviously covering any Washington news along with that. And we've got all of our regular written content. Rick Snyder's show is still in hiatus, but he'll be back if little Danny sells and for the draft and stuff. And check us out.
All right. We will see you in 2 weeks.